Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like first to thank the supporters of this channel and also my Facebook page. Although our community is small, but it is a dedicated one to success. I have been receiving a lot of questions lately, especially in regard to the PhD entrance exams, as we are so or pretty close to these contents, which probably are going to be organized around December. Well, of course, still there is no confirmation nor any specific dates around this topic. But of course, one should not wait to the final call. I believe you know that mostly you will have 15 to 20 days that are between the announcement and the day of the exam. And trust me, no one revises on these 20 days as you spend most of them stressed and confused on which university you might select. Therefore, it would be wise to start from now. Now, in this video, I would like to share my expertise on how students can start revising efficiently and effectively in the same time. So, welcome again to another video. This one is entitled Starting Your Journey to PhD Entrance Exams. My name is Boukhechba Hicham. I am a lecturer at Djelfa University. Now, the core idea of this video is to push reluctant students. Now, those students who are procrastinating, pushing the inevitable. Of course, what I'm doing here, or at least what you should do as a student, you should perceive my words as pieces of advice. And the first one, which I always stress, that the sooner you start revising, the more chance you have to succeed. Of course, without further ado, let us start. So in this lecture, I'm going to introduce a 4-stages plan for you to start your journey to revise and prepare for your PhD exams. So as usual, or what I'm trying to do, I try to be practical. So I would like to avoid these perfect scenarios that we both know that most students now are so stressed that they cannot follow. So let's start with the first stage. The first stage here, what I'm proposing is that you need to start collecting previous questions. So because most students, what they do, they start just reading and start organizing, and that is so frustrating. So before trying to blindly read, looking for lessons or just browsing for information, it would be great, or be of great benefit to start with previous exams. So this will orient your endeavor. So instead of being lost, you are going to control this task. Now, luckily, this task is not that hard, and simply in our digging few Facebook specialized pages or groups would be suffice to collect all the questions that you need. Of course, I'm trying myself to gather, type, and organize them. I always try to help, and this is something that I would do, and of course I will post either on YouTube or my personal page. First, for example, let's start looking at last year questions. For example, we have this one of last year, which about the most challenging task when undertaking research is to decide which methodology to use, what are the factors, and chosen. So this question is about methodology. So this is how you do. You first need to organize. We see, for example, Oran 22, summative and formative assessment have different purposes, reflect details, distinctions. So we have also another one for Oran, and all what you need to do is you need to gather all these questions and you put them in one place. This is going to be, of course, a bit of time consuming, but it will be so rewarding. Of course, the idea is here is to collect as much as you can. I mean, all the questions you can find. So, and if you are patient, you can collect questions outside the PhD exam, for example, extending that to regular to master exams. See, most of the time, for example, when a university teacher in charge of a model will always reflect his or her way of thinking and style in the questions made. So by collecting Masters 2 questions, exams, of course, that is going to give you enough clues. Alhamdulillah, now we have so many Facebook groups that are easily accessible and one can use to obtain these kind of questions. Now, since I mentioned this point, sometimes I really find it weird when a student, for example, goes to these kind of exams and he tells me that he simply or she has no idea about the type of question. I mean, I feel like they are going to some kind of recreation activity. and even bizarre when students like travels great distances for these exams. I mean, that is a bit weird. So instead of doing that, wasting your time, wasting your money, and of course, let's say that's emotional impact. So why don't you start first preparing, getting at least an idea about the questions that you are going to see? Now, the second step has to do with the question, what do we do with all the questions that we have collected? Well, before you try to seriously answer these questions, it would be appropriate first to categorize them into teams or at least related subjects. It all depends on how you put them into different types. For example, the questions that we have just seen can be put into different labels. Let us, for instance, put a folder in which everything associated with ESP is put in, or one for curricula, one for ethical research. You see, the more categories you are going to devise, the better. The purpose of this step is to be acquainted with different concepts. More importantly, it makes you aware of the similarities that exist between different questions. You reach a certain point, of course, where you are going to develop that keen sense or at least characteristic of a quick penetrating mind. So, for example, the more you are going to collect questions, the more you will understand how the concepts are related with each other. However, I would prefer at this stage, at least, you give it a very considerable time. And of course, there is a catch in this step that I really want you to remember. In this step, the moment that you start, you should not stop. It is this step that you should do it once. I mean, never do it over a long period of time. You see, when you start, you have to commit to it daily because think of it like a jigsaw puzzle that needs a reinforced connection between your brain cells. You need speed and you need that short-term memory because you need that bird view over all the questions. Now, always remember that success lies in organization. You need to find ways to keep everything neatly ordered. The end result of this phase is a conceptual mind map that will boost your thinking and strategy. Even at this stage, especially if you were a very fast learner during master's years, you start to recall previous information. Of course, this is not enough. This is why the next stage is crucial. Now, the third step is when things get a bit hard here. You need to start defining various concepts you have gathered and organized. It could be a slow process, needs patience, but one that has to be carried out relatively quickly. Remember, if for any reason you stop in the middle of these stages, you will suffer to come back. This is why I would advise you start with a good spirit. And once you start, do not stop. Even if you take 30 minutes a day to revise, it would be much better than stopping altogether. Now, to make the task simple, we are not going to focus on advanced writing here, so you do not need to write essays, rather unstructured writing, more of a scattered paragraph. Think of them as Lego parts. In each paragraph, try to define a concept. Even if not your own words, copy paste at this level it would be acceptable. What we need here is at least to push that motivation. Do not even try attempt to memorize because that will be so tiring and you will give up. Just write. But remember, we need everything to be organized. I mean, the key element in this stage is organization. You see, at the beginning, we just collected questions. The second stage is trying to organize, put these questions into different labeling. Then we start defining concept. I mean, by this, when you finish the third step, you will have a very good idea of what you were doing, what is going to happen. We just need to push to the last stage. Now let's complicate things further. The last stage I'm proposing is to start writing essay. It is here at this level that things usually scare students. Here, most simply are or lazy to do, or scared, or they don't have that enough confidence to do so. However, some students hold the belief that they can get away with the definition with the definitions they have or they have memorized. In fact, sometimes they just have the illusion that they know, but they don't. With these definitions, the moment you step to that exam, with that adrenaline rush, your mind tends to get stuck, panic takes over, and you start thinking. This is why it's only after you finish and you start recalling information, then comes that famous word, Sita, I already know it. No, but I'm sorry, that's usually it's too late. So that's why it's the most crucial point that one should emphasize is mastering writing introduction. I mean, this is should be the first thing that you should do. I have been advising students from a long time that introductions are the most demanding part of your essay. Usually, on the day of the exam, you spend a considerable time thinking of how to approach the questions. You might have all the pieces of information needed to answer, yet you still fail to do that. Simply put, while you might have memorized all definitions, concepts, the question often would not be restate these definitions, although at the core, this is all what you do. But the question often needs some sort of arguments, counter-arguments, explanations, clarification, and example. This is why it is hard to just memorize. So you can memorize ready-made essays, topic, but the question is usually advanced in a particular way, the way which render it unique. And trust me, teachers always find a way to do so. I personally, on my regular exam, I try to avoid direct questions that I know some students would only write what they have memorized. Now, we can solve these issues. There are two ways. First, the easy way is to memorize so many introductions to the point you really get so familiar with how to introduce a question. The second way, or the other way, you try to design your own introduction. Here, I admit it is so hard and often so tiring, but one that can really boost your writing skill. Now, personally, I advise you try to mix between the two methods. Now, when you are trying to write introduction, try to find a discernible pattern that combine different elements. Another way, try to find the best logical way to link ideas together. You see, by doing this, you can link or glue together concepts that you have written before. Let me give you an example here. By going back to the ESP, we see that in one of the questions, they brought the idea of ESP and designing a curriculum, meaning the most important element is to design content of syllabus according to the student needs. This can also take us to a few other topics like types of syllabuses, the nature of the interaction between teachers and learners. Actually, at this stage, you can flex your muscle and show to what extent you have a critical mind. I believe if one can apply these stages, the chances of winning will increase. And of course, there are tons of variables, but practice makes perfect. At the end, I would like to say thank you, and I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the channel to be tuned for new videos. The next one, inshallah, we are going to talk about questions from last year. We try to categorize them in this series video. So please support this channel and support my Facebook page. Well, thank you so much again.